Working Cows Podcast, episode 233.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network. And this episode is brought to you by Douglas Plant Health. To unharness your soil's fertility and to maximize yield, consider Douglas Plant Health. For more than 3 decades, U.S. farmers, largely organic, have increased yield with the help of SP1 Classic. As fertilizer costs soar and supply chain challenges loom, DPH Biologicals is expanding access to this trusted biofertilizer to the conventional acre. With TerraTrove SP1 Classic, the complete biofertilizer, growers can replace up to 50% of starter fertilizer. Visit dphbio.com to reclaim soil fertility. Very excited today to be joined by Steve Campbell. Steve is well known in the industry as a voice for thoughtful breeding of cattle. And today is unique. It's the first video episode. So if you're listening to the audio of this, you can go over to workingcows.net/233. workingcows.net/233, and embedded there will be the video portion of this episode. And you can watch it there because Steve said for this episode, he thought it was important for people to be able to see what he was talking about. So, give you a chance to go hunt that up and watch it if you want to. I think that there will be a lot of information that's useful for you if you're just listening. But what we're covering today is the bull sale catalog wish list. What we wish was communicated in a bull sale catalog, aside from EPDs, aside from some of the other things that get communicated in bull sale catalogs. What are some cow family things? What are some useful things that could help us decide, is this going to be a range functional male, and is he going to create range functional cow families? So we're going to dive into that and a lot more on the interview today with Steve Campbell. So I'm going to turn it over to that, and then I'll be back in a little bit later on to share with you where we're going from here. Steve, thanks for joining me again today on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much, Clay. It's been a little while. I've had a little feedback from that last podcast we did, and it sounded like it was timely for those that they emailed or called.
Yeah, definitely a timely episode. The drought, and I'd say by the looks of this winter, the drought persists. So, it's good to have some tools in the tool bank for keeping cattle healthy and functioning through that. So appreciate that very much. Yeah. I as well got a lot of feedback out of that. So, we'll put a link in the show notes page for today. If people want to check that out, they can go to the show notes page for today, and there'll be a link to all of Steve's previous episodes. And our first episode together was about, finding the right cow. I think maybe it was the title, something like that. And I was driving somewhere and kind of came up with this idea that maybe we should talk about what would be on your wish list for a bull sale catalog. What would you want to know? What would you want to see? And some of those things. So we've got our picture pulled up, and if you want the video of this, it'll be on my YouTube channel, also in the show notes page for today, which is workingcows.net/233, I believe. So yeah, workingcows.net/233. Go over there. You can see the video, watch along with us, and Steve's going to point some things out as we go along. So yeah, I guess talk about the cow we've got on the screen, and then we'll talk about the bulls that we are looking to get to produce cows like that, or maybe the bulls were looking to get out of cows like that. So,
well, I call her the red solo cup cow. Her head's on this end. Everything's getting bigger as you go back. She's getting taller because estrogen shuts off long bone growth in the front end of the cow first. She's got a big enough belly to eat for 3, wide enough slope from hooks to pins here. Most things on cows are the opposite of the bull. However, 2 things that kind of go hand in hand: the depth of chest. If you've got deep-chested cows, you don't need as deep a chested bull. You still want him as wide up front, but and then slope from hooks to pins. If the bull's got the right slope from hooks to pins, the cow's going to have the right slope from hooks to pins. So looking at this cow and how everything about her is getting smaller as you go forward, as opposed to that, this longhorn bull I saw in the panhandle of Texas, everything about him is getting bigger as you go forward. So we've got that reverse wedge. The first cow to sell would be the reverse wedge, and you want that red solo cup shape for a cow for an animal that requires very few supplements on grass. And I guess when you're talking about what bull do you want, it depends on what your goals on the ranch are.
sure. So, I mean, with this picture we're looking at on the video that is being recorded for this episode, you know, there isn't an abundance of forage where that bull's standing, but he still is in good body condition score. And that's kind of one of those, back to the Johann Zeitzman thing, is inherent body condition score, right? The ability to stay fat on low quality forage and on limited supplementation or no supplementation. Is that kind of track with what you're aiming at here?
Absolutely. Which that inherent body condition, a cow's got to be able to eat enough for 3. He's only got to be able to eat enough for 1. A bull with a great big belly himself doesn't impress me all that much. It could actually make him too lazy. He just needs to come from a mother, but more than that, a family of big bellied cows if you want the bull you're buying to put big bellies in the daughters. The steers in an all forage environment, they're your byproduct. It's the replacement heifers. That one that has 8, 10, 12 calves in a row without skipping, that's the one we're looking for. Well, I guess one of the first things that I would like to see in a bull sale catalog is a picture of mom, alongside the bull that's for sale. And more than EPDs or anything else, that would tell me quite a bit about that cow. This particular bull that we're looking at here, this longhorn bull, which is not known to be a real beefy breed, 5 miles before we saw that bull, we saw this Corianti bull. There again in the panhandle of Texas, not a place with a lot of rainfall or a lot of forage, but you can certainly see he also is walking uphill. Shoulder blades are all but level with the backbone, exactly what you're looking for. Hook bones, all but level with the backbone. He's got this copper bump. We can talk about that a little later. But back to this guy, it's a little harder to see his. But thinking about that cow, her hook bones are level with the backbone, which is giving her this slope from hooks to pins, calving ease. Well, most things on the bull, again, here's the bull, the cow's going to be like this. Most things are the opposite, except if you've got that slope from hooks to pins on a bull, you're going to have it. Well, I guess I better go back up to the bull here. Hang on. If you've got that slope from hooks to pins on the bull, you're going to have it in his daughters.
Sure. And is there a point of diminishing returns on the slope from hooks to pins?
Oh, you can take anything too far, but we have gotten so far away from slope from hooks to pins. I don't have it here in this little deal that I prepared, but a lot of times you'll see this grow bone right here behind the hooks jump up and be this tall, and the hooks and pins might be flat. Most herds I get to, the hook bone is nowhere near level with the backbone. It's down. So we're losing. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I've got a pelvis here, and so the hooks are here, and of course the pins are here. The more slope, as I turn this towards you, you can see the opening. Right. Less slope, more slope.
Yep.
Anyway, there could be a point of diminishing returns. However, Ken Redmond got his master's at Colorado State in 91, and three commonalities. Well, he only used 9,500 head linear measured anywhere from Mexico to Canada. Three commonalities with old cows that have had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping. They have a bigger belly than the herd average, so they can eat enough for three in a dry year, or after they've lost their teeth, they can still digest because they can ruminate. A wider rump, which gives you that rounded pelvic opening as opposed to a narrow one. And then the slope from hooks to pins. And of those three, the one that made the most significant difference later in life was this slope from hooks to pins. And I called Ken and asked him about that. And, he told me all the usual suspects, but he didn't mention the one that had come to my mind, which was, if we don't have that slope from hooks to pins at any time in life, but especially older in life when it's harder to get all the nutrition that a cow needs. If the pelvic floor is sloping back into the cow and something foreign gets taken in there, she now gets infected, and her immune system is not working as well when she is 12 as it was when she was 2, and she gets cystic ovaries, doesn't breed back, she's kicked out of the herd. So that I look at it structurally. Not only is it easier to get the calf out of that slope, but the lack of disease later on in life. Well, if we want that lack of disease later on in life, we're going to need to find bulls whose hook bones are level with the backbone. And then there's good slope from hooks to pins. I probably beat that up too much, Clay.
No, that's all right. I think like you said, in the industry, we've gotten so far away from it, and I'm not sure that this was a bull prospect, but a couple of weeks after I sat in on your class that Bart Carmichael hosted here in Faith, I sent you a picture of a bull that was basically the opposite of everything we're talking about today. And I would say he was even sloping downhill from his pins to his hooks. It was so out of whack. It was, and I think your response was, he will not raise grass efficient females. So that's ultimately what we're talking about, right? Is the ability to get by on grass. Back, to this idea, fertility is a function of fleshing ability, that, if they are able to stay fat, they will be more prone to breed earlier and breed back going forward. So that's kind of, I think, one of the things that we're looking at here for sure. And are there some other reasons that it would be valuable to see a picture of mom in the bull sale catalog along with the bull that you're buying?
Yes, I want to back up though. There's that fleshing ability deal. There's three things. There's a shape, and of course in the cow it's that red solo cup. There's glandular function, early shedding. I mean, the animals that shed early. I think if I were a betting man and went to Vegas, I'd make money here. The cattle that shed the earliest will give you more calves than those who have not shed yet by the time you put the bull in. That one, to me, is a slam dunk. And then butter fat. We'll get into the indicators for butter fat here in a minute. Is there some reason other than the shape of that cow that I want to see her along with that bull? Well, typically people take a picture of an animal on the day of the year that's the most flattering to that animal in their environment. Probably not in the middle of the winter in 2 foot of snow, but that can tell us a story as well. Anyway, the slick, hided, shiny, not only slick, but shiny hair coat, the size of her guts, the shape of her udder and the teats. Does she have a ewe neck? Back to this cow, if you look at her from her shoulders, that it goes down. Oops, I moved something here, and then back up. You do not want it flat across here, or you certainly don't want a hump. That's too masculine. They won't be walking downhill. Those are the heifers not to select for a cow that would give you 8 or 10 calves in a row without skipping.
Sure. And how early are these things showing up? You mentioned, I think early on, or maybe before we started recording, you mentioned that these bull calves are flat across shoulder blades, and then I think flat from the shoulders to the hook bones early on, in like maybe from the day they're born. Or how early do you think this shows up?
The bull calves who have a blocky head, that's all you can see when they first come out. But if they're flat across the top of the shoulders and the backbone, and they're flat hook bones to backbone, and they're wider, the legs are set out on the corners, they're a bull prospect right off the bat. And of course, if you already know who mommy is, but if I don't know who mommy is and I show up, that's what I'm looking for, is that squareness, if you will, all the way around. You can't really get to that 8 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound sugar sack that Johann talks about, Johann Zietzman, unless you've got that squareness, that flat across the shoulders and the hooks, backbone hook. The day they're born, at 6 months of age, and of course, once they develop a little bit, the size of the scrotum, are they out there following the bull while he's active in the herd? Do they have a low note? I always like seeing bulls that keep the hair worn off of the pole. I don't want to see them too roly-poly. I want to be able to see a little bit of muscle definition. You're probably not going to see that as the calf so much, but you see a lot of calves that have started wearing the hair off of the pole. They have a little more testosterone. They're out playing baseball while couch potatoes are watching the Winter Olympics. Bad analogies, maybe.
No, I get it. So, I think the constant struggle in this episode will be to focus on the bulls, and that's because I think the cow is so important. In this deal, it's so hard. We keep coming back to the cow, and that's great. I'm fine with that. We'll follow this episode wherever it goes. But is there more to say about what you want to see in the bull sale catalog from the cow's perspective, or what are some other things there that you would like to talk about?
Well, if I can see the cow, one, I'll know about the diameter of her tail. When I was younger than you, Clay, a broom-tailed cow. Well, I don't know if I didn't hear the word handle or if somebody left it out, but a broom handle is much smaller in diameter. Hang on one second. I got a picture. A much smaller in diameter tail. Well, if 22, least I know what page if I could get to it in a hurry. I don't know how good you can see.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the longer bone. We were not doing. This is in the Bonsma lectures. It's on page 22. Just a minute. I think I've got that slide in this PowerPoint. Hang on one second. Okay, so we're looking at this pelvis. And of course, there's a different slope to both of these. But before the slope, you stretch height over the top of either one of these, and they're going to look pretty much the same on the top side. I mean, you've got this little kink at the end of the tail, and more on that in a minute. But a broom-handled tailed cow, a small in diameter tail. Small in diameter, well, the only place for a thicker tail to go is down into the pelvic opening. We just took up some of the room. Mm. So if you can see Mom, if you can see Junior with a small diameter tail, you're going to be pulling fewer calves. You're going to have more butterfat. I mean, the expression was that broom, they left out the word handled, tailed cow. That broom-tailed cow is more fertile. I always thought it was the swishy part on the floor. That means something, but the diameter of that handle is the biggest thing there. Sorry, I don't even know how I got there.
All right, we were talking more about cows and what we want to see in that bull sale catalog. So I'm content with however you want to continue. Maybe the pun is intended. Continue fleshing that out.
Typically, these pictures are taken in the summertime when they look good on green grass, and that's okay. I mean, you kind of know everybody's going to take the most flattering picture they can. The space race has gotten us into some frame scores that are out of balance with nature. And for most herds out there, maybe not people that are listening to this, but for most herds in the U.S., for them going to a frame 4 or 4.5 bull on their frame 6.5, well, let's just say it was a frame 4.5 bull on 6.5 cows. The offspring are going to be about a 5.5. Now, I don't want to put an 18-month-old frame 4.5 bull on 6.5 cows, especially if he's very aggressive, because he's not grown up to his height yet. I mean, he's 4 or 5 before he gets there. So his angle of attack, I just hear, seem like every year about a broken tool on my very best bull. Well, there's a cow in heat and he was going for it and he glanced off and we've got a broken tool. So if you're trying to downsize the herd, you really need bulls that, well, you could AI, but you need bulls that are already grown up to that 4.5 to use on the 6.5. You might use the 4.5 frame bull on the 6.5 frame heifers and get it done, but not the mature cows.
Sure. And you said that they are still growing up, up till they're 4 or 5 years old. Is that right? The bulls?
Yeah, I think the frame score chart shows that somewhere between 4 and 5 years of age, they actually attain whatever a frame. I mean, and it's graduated. At 3, they're this tall. A frame 4.5 is this tall, and at 2, a frame 4.5 is this tall. And as a yearling, they're smaller. So if they're going to grow 3 or 4 more inches, but you already put them with mature cows, we're kind of creating a problem.
Gotcha. And are there other things that are developing along with that? I mean, you've talked about everything from the shape of the scrotum to some of those other things. Are there other things that are developing all the way up into that age? That you want to give them some time to develop, or can you tell early on, this is going to be the right kind of guy?
So this is right out of Herd Bull Fertility by James Grayson. Is that working?
Yep.
Expanding on your screen.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So here we are at 7.5 to 9 months of age. I think he did 4,500 bulls birth to death, and then something like over 15,000 altogether. But if you're at 7.5 months of age, you would, for the optimal, you'd use the 5 inches long and 28 centimeter circumference. And if you were at 9 months, you'd use the 5.5 and 29. But you can see how they're growing by the time you're 12 to 16 months of age. And then we have even bigger and bigger as they go forward. Length is more important than circumference, but we don't measure length anymore. But that would be from the top of the testicle to the bottom of the epididymis.
And where's the epididymis is sitting right there on the bottom then? Yeah.
So in this photo here, or I guess a drawing on the right, here's the epididymis. Mm-hmm. You want it to look like a football. You want both sides even. Worst possible sin is to have one testicle shorter than the other, hypoplasia. And Gerald Wyatt, Classic Livestock Management Services out of Australia, said if you can see, and this is probably a two-year-old animal, but it could be younger. If you can see the epididymis on the bottom of the scrotum from 10 feet away, you have pretty good assurance that he can breed 50 to 60 cows in the first 21 days along that line. Mom and Dad got married in 1950, and Dad said, Joanne, whatever you do when you get to Clay's place, don't ask him how many cows he's got. It's, Clay, how much money you got in the bank? He said, just count his bulls, multiply times 50, as in 50 cows. You'll be real close. We don't even probably average half of that today. Part of that is this slide in fertility on the male side, but also the lack of fertility. If we're breeding for growth, we're getting less fertility. It's a teeter-totter. I called Bart there, and the other day started a conversation about, well, where should that fulcrum be on the teeter-totter between growth and fertility? And a couple of there's a whole bunch of generalizations in here, so nothing's gospel. It's the idea, but the farther south you go, the shorter in height and the lower in weight and the more of an oval you get up front behind the front legs, so that animals can get rid of heat at the equator. And the further north you go, the taller they get, the more they weigh, and the more of an O, so you can retain heat up north. So maybe at the equator, the fulcrum between reproduction and growth would be over here at 3.5. And maybe in Saskatchewan, it might be at a 5. I would venture to guess there may be data out there. I do not know what it is, but I would venture to guess that around a 4.5, 4 to 5 frame cows. I think, depending on your environment, every zip code's different, elevation, amount of rain. I adapted this linear measurement spreadsheet with a column to put in how many acres does it take to run a cow. And then that would determine how many points she gets for having a deep chest where it takes 250 acres to run a cow versus quite a bit less depth of chest and narrower where it takes 2 acres to run a cow.
Sure. Yeah. That's helpful. I like the thinking on the fulcrum and the teeter-totter and trying to keep those things in balance, right? Not get too far one way or the other, because at the end of the day, we're working on the bottom line, and there's cows that'll eat you out of house and home. but there's cows that'll also raise a dink calf, and we got to figure out how to find the right balance there. You were talking about some of the things on the bull size or the scrotum size and those things, and I saw a screenshot of a bull slide recently where they were saying 1 cow per month of age at turnout. Recommended 1 cow to the bull per month of age at turnout. So an 18-month-old bull, 18 cows. So, and I've heard you talk about that, back in the 50s, we were count the bulls, multiply by 50. Is there some level at which we're letting them grow up to it? I'm also thinking about a competitive breeding environment, but then you're turning bulls that aren't fully grown up onto mature cows, and they are having potentially, and then they're having issues like you were talking about with broken tools and those things. So could you help me think about some of those rules of thumb, I guess?
I had never thought of it in months before, but that's maybe on the front end. Well, it all depends. Sorry.
That's fine.
But, for a good rule of thumb, that's not bad. If you have bulls that are developed in a real world environment, it's going to take them more months to get developed where they're not going to look the part at 18 months of age. They're in the panhandle of Texas. But if you went to use them by the time they were 27 months of age, they're 3 months after. Okay. Anyway, they would probably do a good job, and you could probably turn them out with 27 or more animals. But just for a rule of thumb, that I can see that, and I could say that it would depend on the males and how many of the boxes they check. But no, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. I pulled this screen up here, this picture, kind of back to what did I want to see when I was looking at that cow. I mentioned the udder of the cow and the shape of the teats, and I'm going to blow this up here a little bit. If they have teats, you want them all here on the belly. You don't want them on the neck because you tend to get tilted udders. This is Hereford bull over in Australia, and this funnel-shaped teat. I don't have a prop right here in front of me that I can do, but those teats would go from being about this big around right at the udder attachment, and in a period of about 2.5 inches, they would go to a point. So this funnel, he had a herd of cows that had more udder issues than any herd I'd ever been in, and so we talked about how to, if this one didn't exist at all, and this teat was up here on the belly, you still have a little wrinkle here, but he'd be all right. But boy, this is just a real no-no. And of course, if mom doesn't have good teats, you really can't expect Junior to throw offspring with good teats. The shape of the scrotum determines udder, the good quarters, the tilted, saggy teat size and shape, as you can see in that picture there. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just going back to that question about the cow.
No, I appreciate it. It's good. Early on you talked about good families of cows as being pretty important. Can you walk me through what you're talking about there a little bit more? Is it mom and her sisters and kind of that way of thinking, or what is it?
You go to a breeder who has had what I call years of thoughtful breeding. he has been the eye on trying to get to 12 o'clock for years and years. And he started out and he had cattle at 9 and 3. And every year he got rid of, now we're at 10 and 2. And now we're at 11 and 1. And the longer he's been doing that, he's gotten rid of all of the problems. And so when you go in a herd like that and you find a bull and you go, well, who's this mom? And okay, here she is. And here's grandma, and here's these 2 or 3 aunts, and here's some sisters. And it's like, they all look the same, and none of them have problems in the udder area or bone structure, or they're all early shedders. You know that this fellow has selected for the things you're trying to put into your herd, versus finally it was just a good nick. And this bull with this cow, and we got a bull that looked just like what we were looking for. Just a second here. We got a bull that looked like this because we just happened to put 2 individuals together that created Wilt Chamberlain or, Emmett Smith or, whomever, right. Whatever it is you're trying to create. But that doesn't mean every time they get together, they will. So that Bodacious, the bucking bull Bodacious, they bred him to, I don't know how many hundreds of cows. They couldn't recreate him. It was just a good nick. It was his mom that had all the stuff, not necessarily his dad. And if they'd done some embryos, they'd have gotten the same thing. But he was an unusual specimen. Secretariat. I mean, his heart was 22 pounds. The next biggest one was Sham, who came in second in the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. His was 18, and the next biggest one was 14 pounds. So it was one of those, the stars aligned things. Well, if you go someplace and the cattle all kind of look the same, rather than there's this big bell curve of bulls and cows, and somebody has stuck to their guns for a period of time. And I think you're going to get more of the cookie cutter calf crop out of that. You're going to move your cow herd's offspring more in unison to whatever you're aiming at.
Are there it sounds to me like a lot of pictures would be useful in a bull sale catalog. Are there numbers that are useful? Would it be more linear measurement numbers that would be useful? Are there ratios that would be useful as far as, the length of this to the compared to the length of that? Some of those. What other things would be useful in a bull sale catalog?
Clay, remind me later on. I got a little short video of a Canadian using a piece of string to measure an animal. I think it was a dairy thing. It's kind of interesting. The more the cow is walking downhill. Oh, you asked a question earlier and I didn't get to it. Rarely at 2 are you going to be seeing a bull walking uphill. Okay. If they're going to be walking uphill, usually they are by 3. Every once in a while, you'll find one walking uphill at 2. The females, though, you can find them walking downhill. And so if you're looking at mom and she's got that 2-inch rake on the top side of the wedge, Junior's probably going to be going the other direction, like this bull we're looking at here. The wider the shoulders are on the bull, the wider the rump will be on the cow. So the flatter it is across the top of those shoulder blades and the more width there is between the top of those shoulder blades, the fewer days of gestation that bull is going to create in those cows. Michael McDonald, who did a lot of linear measuring, for every inch that the bull's shoulders measured from the widest point on each side, what would give you wide shoulders on a bull? Well, the wider he is across the top, the more vertical the last rib is, that's going to tend to shove his front legs out. So if we've got vertical ribs on bulls, we'll have the last rib angled somewhere between the hock and the ankle. That's what we're looking for in a beef animal. Dairy, that you kind of want them above. This is a South Pole in East Texas. Anyway, so
you're
the more
saying that the back rib on a cow is going to point somewhere between the hock and the ankle.
Hock and the ankle. That's what we want. Well, if the more vertical that last rib is on the bull, the further back that last rib is going to point. I'm sorry, I'm getting out of field from the question, but she doesn't do as good a job of taking care of her calf. The more vertical the last rib on the cow, she looks great all the time. I mean, 9 out of 10, but she doesn't raise a good calf. The ones that raise the better calf, that last rib is angled. Well, to get that, we need the vertical rib on the bull. So we've got the width up top. We've got vertical ribs. We've got width between the front legs. Well, for each inch that those shoulders, measured from the widest point here on each side, are wider than the length of the rump, from the front of the hook bone to the back of the pin. At 1 year of age, for each inch, the shoulders are wider than the length of the rump. It's 2.5 days less gestation. Well, that's about a 5-pound lighter calf. So a story, leave it in, cut it out, whatever you want to do. I was in North Dakota, and day one, we sorted through 300 and some odd cows with one fellow, and here's your best cows, and these should go down the road and use these until, you have better ones to replace. Second day, other guys' cows. The third day, they had, I don't know how many bulls there, about 80, and we split them into the two owners. And first owner, don't use these, or taking you the wrong direction. Here's your best 10. I like that bull the best. Same thing for the other guy. Here's your best 8, and I like that bull the best. They looked at each other, started laughing, and I'm like, why are you laughing? And they go, we both bought those bulls as calving ease bulls. Well, they bought them as calving ease bulls because they had a low birth weight. They had a low birth weight because their fathers were very masculine. Wide shoulders control the length of gestation.
Are there, maybe the best thing to do is wait for the bull sale catalog to come in the mail and then call up the guy who sent you the bull sale catalog and said, let me come look at your cows. Is that,
there are way too few people that do that. They look at numbers. And I'll go places and somebody wants to hand me all the numbers and thank you. And I, fold them and stick them in my back pocket and I go make all my selections. And then I say, okay, tell me what you think the numbers say about these particular animals, because I don't want the numbers to confuse me about the animal that I'm looking at. People have gotten, I think, in trouble by relying too much on the numbers, which you can put into your BlackBerry or your Apple or your Android. And that is not the animal standing in front of you, is the data in your phone. It's first and foremost, you just need an eye for animals. Again, the cow is the red solo cup and the bull is the reverse.
Yep.
Red solo cup. He doesn't have to have a big enough belly to eat for 3. And there's a lot of bulls get sold because they have a big belly. It probably makes them lazy.
And I think that, like you said, they need some time to develop. They're probably not walking uphill at 2. We're seeing more and more coming 2-year-old sales all the time. But even then, you're probably a little too early. So if you could go look at the cows and then make some selections.
And she's walking downhill by 2 or 3 inches. Okay, I'm probably going to get that bull I'm looking for. I mean, here's a child's toy. I guess I'll put it on there, and you can kind of see he's going up a little bit there,
yep,
even at the shoulder. Ferdinand the bull, the cartoon. I mean, you can't even see his back end. It's all shoulders. And one time I had a bull I liked, and I called Gerald Fry, and I said, well, Gerald, I really like the front end of this bull, but his back end isn't very big. And Gerald, classic Gerald, just right like this. He goes, well, he says, I think every defensive player in the NFL knew how big Jim Brown's shoulders were, but I doubt there's one of them could have told you what size pants he wore. And this is a great time to be talking about that because the Browns are in the Super Bowl. Most, I don't know, there'd be a lot of people in here who remember Jim Brown that would be listening to this sort of thing.
Yeah, very good. Could we talk a little bit about what you'd like to see communicated as far as development of the bulls in the bull sale catalog? Well,
personal preference, leaving that bull on mom as long as possible. If she's an early shedder, got good glandular function, if she's got butterfat, that long weaning, if you will, developing the villi in the rumen of him, he will get more out of every bite he takes for the rest of his life. Just like developing a heifer. Well, if you're selling bulls and you leave those bulls on their mother for 10 months, they will remain a functional bull more months and years than one that gets weaned at 7 months. Okay? A betting man, I would be there. The least amount of grain possible. You're putting fat in the scrotum, which makes it too warm, and in the testicles themselves. So you're getting less volume of semen and more abnorms because they stayed too hot. They need an adequate amount of development to be able to be used by tube, but not so much that it makes them lazy.
You mentioned butterfat as well. Are there some butterfat indicators on bulls that you can look for? Or where do we get those? How do we find them?
Small in diameter cannon bones, but bulls don't have that. That small diameter tail, you could have that pointed pole on a bull. If you took a tennis ball and cut the ball in half and then just set it right here on top, that's butterfat. Pointed ears would be butterfat. But one that's real easy to see is the number of vertical folds in the hide, which is an indicator of a very loose hide. Well, that is number 2. Whether you're looking for butterfat or you're looking for tender meat, that is the number 2 indicator for both. Now, on a cow, for butterfat, it's a bald udder. On a steer or a heifer, it's going to be a small diameter cannon bone. But number 2 would be those vertical folds. So if you could see his mother and then you see him with a lot of vertical folds, he's going to cure, is that the right term? He's going to put butterfat in his daughters. His daughters are going to be easy keeping because they have a lot of butterfat. It's going to be easy for them to maintain fat on their back, and they're going to give it to their sons and daughters.
You talked about earlier, a star, not a scar, and I think we're looking at a star here, if I'm right.
Yeah, right here, a star.
What's that telling us?
How do I best say it? That's the pituitary. That's what that star is signifying. And the testes and the ovaries are developed at the same time. So if we have a star like this, everything was going pretty good in utero at that time. All right. But if we have a scar, like what we're seeing on the front of this, the water buffalo look, he has a fertility problem. Well, James Drayson, herd bull fertility, whenever the hair is standing on the pole, it's a period of low or no fertility. Well, this guy is telling us twice that he's got a problem. both with the hair standing on the bull, but something was going on in utero. Maybe all of the wind towers were freezing in Texas at just exactly the wrong time, and it set this up. It was a real 100-year blizzard in North Dakota, and hey, all we're trying to do here is stay alive. And two months later, okay, we'll get back to making baby. You may have set this in place. A drought has a long tail, an ice storm, lack of or too much snow, all of those things. The smoke from the Canada fires 2 or 3 summers ago. Now that this bull's too old for that, but any of those kinds of abnormal stressors at just the wrong time. He might have looked great everywhere else. I just took a picture of him there laying down because of that. He's saying, regardless of what the rest of the body looks like, I've got a problem in fertility. Okay.
Yep. So I'd asked a question earlier. Good quality pictures, the right pictures are helpful. Maybe a word about their development would be helpful. But are there linear measurements or ratios that would be helpful in the absence of pictures or alongside those pictures? Or do those depend too much from individual to individual to not be that helpful?
No, there would be linear measurements that I would say would be the most helpful. Now, you think about putting cattle in a feedlot, and you put them in there and their front toes, they're toed out. Well, you think about a ribeye steak or a chuck roast. Not only is there marbling in the muscle, but there's fat deposits between the muscles. So as they get fatter and fatter in the feedlot, they start looking pigeon-toed because they've added so much fat, which what I wanted to say was how much wider the shoulders are than the length of the rump. But if that has been fed in there with grain, it's a misnomer. So I guess Michael Davis, and I guess he's died recently, he asked me a question one time, and he said, if I wanted you to go buy a bull for me, what would you look for? And I go, well, what about this? Or no. You can't. You can come and look at my cows, but you can't ask me any questions about my cows. And I tried 2 or 3 things, and I said, well, finally, Michael, I would just look at your cows, and whatever the biggest problem was, I would go find a bull that was going to correct that better than any other bull I could find. He said, bingo, that was the answer I was looking for. Well, if you want 1 or 2 numbers, linear measurement wise, that you can't change no matter how you feed them, is that head twice as long as it is wide? A blocky head. If that face is 18 inches long, is it 9 inches wide? Genetically, phenotypically, that animal started out to be the right thing. Now, you could overfeed him with grain and foul up his scrotum, but at least his head was saying, I started out right. If all the feeding were equal, well, I can't even say that. The shoulders versus rump length is a pretty good one, but if you're feeding a lot of grain, it could get you in trouble. If you've got the average cow I see in the U.S., you need more depth of chest in the front end of your bulls. But I've been to a number of places in the last couple of years where their cattle were getting borderline too deep up front, and they did not need as deep a chest. The more acres it takes to run a cow, the more depth of chest you can use in that cow. And the fewer acres it takes, the less depth of chest. So heart girth versus top line on a bull, flank versus top line on a cow. There, I was pretty pointed there about, I tied my own hands and I said, if I could only do one thing, it would be that head. And I'll still stand by that.
Very good. I think that's pretty helpful stuff, Steve. I really appreciate it. Is there any other major things on your wish list that we haven't covered yet today?
Well, just those cows. I mean, if you can get a picture of those cows, early shedding, butter fat, ability to eat enough for three, that red Solo Cup cow thing. Mm-hmm. Well, we want the bull to be the opposite of that. If you want a bull that looks like this, the cow, his mother is going to look something, different breeds. Okay. Right. But she's going to be walking downhill on level ground. If she's flat, you are not going to get this. You might get a bull that looks like this, nice and round, but he's level. I think in that picture, he's about 4. But his mom was probably flat on top too. This bull here walking uphill, he had to have a mother that was walking downhill. The dimorphism. You go to somebody's place and you want to buy males or females. The more difference there is in the look of the males versus the females, the more fertility is represented in that herd.
Yep. And I think that one of the things that maybe you've said here that I'd like to call attention to is that, if you're in a place where it takes 250 acres to raise a cow for a year, then you're going to want a deeper chested critter. And if you're in a place where it takes 2, you want a not as deep a chested cow. So maybe the lesson learned there is that it's probably a good idea to buy bulls from your neighbors or somebody in your neighborhood who has been doing years and years of thoughtful breeding, as you would like to say.
Absolutely. And, are you looking for a cow herd that takes fewer supplements? Well, they're probably going to be shorter with bigger bellies and wider butts than what you've got now. And then they don't have that raised tail process that jumps up behind those hook bones, or maybe it doesn't jump up behind the hook bones. Maybe the hook bones are just down 2 or 3 inches from the backbone.
Yep. I've said maybe too many times that we were out of balance because we have gotten a lot of terminal traits, and that really that is at odds with maternal traits or cattle that are going to breed quickly or early maturing and all that. Is that really true? Because you start to talk about butterfat and you talk about that being an indication of intermuscular marbling, and that's a terminal thing. We want well marbled ribeyes, right? So maybe the ribeyes will be smaller and the carcass merits, the yield, and all those things will be different, but they're well marbled. So maybe it's not as big, but it's still well marbled, even out of a maternal animal who's got the butterfat indicators. Would you agree with that?
Not exactly, Clay. For 40 years, fat was bad. Wesson Corn Oil was the biggest advertiser on Red Skelton's show. And because we went to vegetable fat instead of animal fat, of course, they couldn't call the vegetable stuff fat because fat's bad. We kept going with these terminal crosses to get growth and less fat. And then they had to pour grain to them to get the marbling. Whereas if you had an animal that had more reproduction, they have more butter fat inherently to be able to maintain their body condition, and they would marble on grass. So we got very good. Not to get political on you here. We got very good at producing the kind of meat the government told us we were supposed to be eating. And we got fat as a nation by following their advice. And I'll shut up
Well, maybe we'll just end it there by giving you an opportunity to talk about schools that you may or may not have coming up and where people could go to find that information. And then if you've got 10 minutes, I'll let you rant about the public health situation in this nation as some bonus content, because I enjoy it and I'm on board with what you're saying.
So on my website, Taylor, spelled with an I, Taylor made, let's see, there's a slide here so you can find it all. Yeah, there we go. TaylorMadeCattle.com. I have a schedule, and I list one where these different schools are. There's the one the 22nd and 3rd of April in Palestine, Texas. I'm trying to get one put together for the next weekend down in Fredericksburg, Texas. I've got a field day over in Oklahoma at the end of May. There's a thing in Louisiana in end of September. And the 1st of October, there's a deal in the northeast Arkansas. And then the next weekend, about the middle of October, there's one in southeast Ohio. But I list kind of when I'm going, where I'm going. And I've had a number of people look at that and then find that I might be in their area of Missouri or something on a certain day or time and ranch visits, or put together other field days or 2-day schools. Yeah, so I guess my contact information's right there. Here's that broom handle tail. Yeah. We're looking for this cow with that tail so that we have that bull that has daughters that have inherent body condition and easy calving.
If you can stay on that slide for a second, I want to ask you a question about it, because in the Johann Zietzman texting group, it seems a lot of the bulls that they really get excited about have that same kind of bulge in the rump where the rump kind of comes out and then back in down towards the leg. Yep. Well, it's from the top. There's kind of, it's rounded out towards the back. Yep. Right there, out towards the back and then down in towards the leg. It comes back in. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess I don't know exactly what you're saying. The stifle muscle right here. We got the hip socket, stifle joint, hock. The earlier in life, you can see that stifle muscle stick out, bull or heifer calf. The more butterfat, the more fertile those animals tend to be. But I'm not understanding.
Sure. Well, right next to her tail.
Okay.
It's sticking out there farther. It's not straight up and down right there. Where.
Oh, absolutely. You do not want a bubble-butted cow. That is bull's okay, but you want it to come from round down, and then from the pins it drops, and then it can round into the bottom of above the hock. But yeah, you do not want a bubble-butted cow. She's one of those that's going to look good but not raise a good calf.
Yep.
Is that where you were going?
Yes. And this is the picture of kind of the maybe the total package. She's got the U neck. She's walking downhill. She's sloped from hooks to pins. Got the broom handle tail. She's.
Let's see if I can do this. See, her face has got a little bit of definition to it, some fineness. Mm-hmm. You can find heads that are shaped like that, but they're just kind of round, kind of blah. She's a little bit sexy this way. I don't know. She's probably chewing. Yeah, she's got something in her mouth. Where did I put that? There's the less, when they're just standing there and they're not chewing, the less of that bottom chin you can see, the more fertile they are. The more of that chin you can see, the growthier the animal is. Mm. So there is a picture. Sorry, I'm going to go.
That's all right. Would she qualify as having pointed ears here?
She does.
Yep.
Okay, can you see the lack of bottom chin there? Yeah, the more of that you can see, the growthier the animal. The less, the more fertile.
Very good. Yep, I can see it. Very good. Well, Steve, really, thank you. Appreciate your time today. We could go on for hours, but thank you so much for taking the time.
Clay, my pleasure. I'm glad we both talked to Bart sometime in the last couple of weeks. Take care and God bless.
Thank you. You as well.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
As always, very helpful stuff with Steve, and really appreciate his time, really appreciate his friendship over the years, and his investment in this audience. All of his episodes will be linked in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/233, workingcows.net/233. You can go there and find all of his past episodes. So, coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, I think we're headed towards Wayne Knight. Wayne Knight is the executive director of Holistic Management International, and we're going to talk to him about simplified range monitoring. They've got an initiative at Holistic Management International to simplify range monitoring, and so we're going to talk to him about that coming up real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.